All right. Yes. Yes, Chopper, 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 Chopper. Thank you. All right, so welcome to the DelMar Droid Builders version 2 or episode 2. Today we're just going to talk a little bit about some basic terminology, since droids have so much pieces, parts in them, and people start throwing around a lot of terminology. Sometimes it's hard to keep track of the conversation, so that's what we're just going to cover tonight. So we'll cover the major portions of droids: motions, electrics, servos, and whatnot. Happy to entertain any questions as we go, because I already know this stuff, and if you have something that I don't explain well, please stop me and we'll go into it. So most droids move, and to get them to move, they need some motors. There's different types of motors, and I'm partial to the brushed motors. They look like this. They run on plus and minus volts. If you run the volts the other way, the motor runs backwards. There's no real restrictions. You put more current on it and it goes faster. You put less volts, it goes slower. Very easy to understand and very easy to wire. And they're less expensive than these brushless motors, which require a pulse signal to charge the right magnetic coil in the motor to make it spin. And to do that, you have to send different pulse rates to get the motor to spin at different speeds in different directions, and that takes a different controller. It will not work with the same controller that works with a brushed motor. A lot of people use the brush motors because, like I said, they're cheap and they're easy to understand, but they're not as efficient, and they I don't say that's probably the biggest cut on them. They're not as efficient. Whereas you have a brushless motor, you can go all day on the same amount of energy that would, or battery power that would burn out or use up a brush motor. They come in different flavors: 12 volt, 24 volt. Common question is, can I run my 24 volt motor on 12 volts? Yes. Can I run my 12 volt motor on 24 volts? No. It will for a little while, then it won't work anymore. So, in general, I'm a fan of 24 volt motors for the drive systems because they're you get more gusto out of them, which is a technical term. It takes less amps to run the 24 volts and get the same movement out of it. It's just, I think, more robust for the high torque back and forth that I tend to make my droids dance a lot. And I just like having a little bit of extra headroom. That I just like the 24 volt.
Unlimited power.
Unlimited power. That's a bad impression. So, also droids have sounds, and there's a lot of different ways to make sounds in droids. So, this is the back of my R5 unit, and what I'll highlight in this picture is this device here is known as an MP3 trigger. It's got a little SD card in it, and that SD card just stores MP3 files. And as you can guess by the name, MP3 trigger means that you trigger those MP3s, and there's a little signal going into that tells it which of those files to play based on what button you press on your remote, or however you want to trigger, how you want to trigger the sounds. So the sound comes out of that on an audio jack, just like a headphone jack, comes over, splits to these flower jacks or RCA jacks, and into a sound amplifier. And that sound amplifier powers speakers. So it's a fairly straightforward design. These are kind of pricey. This is just like a $34 15 watt amplifier, which I've used in all my droids. And then just some 3-inch speakers that you put in a car, 4 ohm, which is matching the output of the amplifier that I bought. And then this little device here is just a ground isolator, so that you don't get a buzzing sound in your speakers. There's other ways of, instead of using this, there's a DF player, which is a much smaller unit, much cheaper unit, and it wires up basically the same and behaves mostly the same, but it's just a different company that makes them. But a lot of people have support for this in their code, so a lot of people go out and spend the $53 or whatever these cost nowadays to get the MP3 trigger. And there's another alternative that's coming out very soon. You can already get it as an app on your phone. It's a human-cyborg relations where you can have a Droid R2D2 basically synthesizer. And I don't mean that it sounds like a fake keyboard. It's actually R2D2's producing, the app produces R2D2 sounds in real time with a mood of whatever R2D2's mood is. If he's happy, if he's sad, if he's angry or scared, and if he's getting blown up. So and as you keep making him happy, he gets happier sounds that are being generated in real time. And right now that's an app on the phone. You can also do it with any other Droid. There's a generic Droid vocalizer that you can modulate the sounds up and down and different filters to get your own unique Droid, as well as Gonk Droid. But the exciting thing is they're releasing a hardware version of this that you can mount in your Droid and replace this with, and when you wire it into your system, it will produce real-time, unique sounds for the Droid. So it's not the exact same file being played back like in a loop over and over, but it'll be something unique based on the situation that may never be heard again, but is very uniquely identifiable as that Droid.
Tim, what was the wire again connecting the MP3 trigger to the amplifier?
This is just a signal wire that goes from the Arduino that tells it which sound to play and when to play it. And you can also adjust the volume on that same signal. Yes?
Does the amplifier actually make the speakers louder?
Yes. So this is a headphone jack, and if you plug headphones in there, there's enough power in that jack to power some headphones. But it's called a line level signal. It's not really amplified, so you could hear it if you just plug the speaker straight into it, but you may not hear anything because there's just not enough energy coming across that signal. So that signal goes into an amplifier, and then it gets amplified. It makes the waves bigger and has more energy behind it, so it can actually drive speakers. So
would that pretty much be the same process they use for like the NeoPixel lightsabers, for example?
Well, every sound that is generated electronically requires a signal, an amplification, and a speaker.
Okay.
So sometimes they have the signal generator and amplifier kind of as one unit, and it's talking directly to a speaker. So the lightsabers probably have some kind of situation like that where the generating source can handle so much output, but it's going to be limited because amplifiers create heat and they take power, and if it's a small battery operated device, they're not going to drive that amplifier too far because it can't physically produce that. And when you get big amplifiers, you need big components or bigger components. So anything that's going to be small and handheld or fit inside something like that is not going to be anywhere close. And even this is only a 15 watt system. When you hear 50, 100, 150, 200, 250 watts for car stereo systems. So it sounds small in comparison, but this is the same 15 watts. I don't say done right, but yeah, okay, Chopper. You can take 15 watts pretty far. Now you get to a noisy convention hall, it's going to be hard for any system that's not just like a dedicated sound system to pierce through a crowd. And at the end of the day, you have to move air. Yeah. And you move air by moving the speaker, and it takes energy to do that, and a lot of energy, a lot of air, in a big speaker. Or some interesting acoustics where you put speakers in boxes like I did with our Duo. We can amplify it internally, acoustically amplify it, which is also a way of doing it. Guitars are boxes because the box is an amplifier, an acoustic amplifier. The sound bounces around the side, gets louder, and comes out. So there's many ways to skin the cat. Most people just go, I want electric amplification speakers, and they're done. But you can do literally as much or little on this. You don't even have to have sound, but most people want to see or hear droids.
Where is Chopper's speakers at?
He's got two. He's actually got surround sound. So this panel here, I built a custom mount for the speaker in the front, and in the back, he's also got a grill right here that has a speaker, a 3-inch speaker unloading out the back. So he actually pushes out sound in all directions, which helps because when you create a sound with a speaker, the speaker moves forward and pushes air that way, and then it moves back and pushes air that way. And if those sound waves hit each other, they cancel because they're actually opposite movements. So that's why you put a speaker in a box. That's why you try to keep just the sound energy just as much as coming out the back as is coming out the front. By definition, it's moving through the air. So if you can kind of capture that air and keep it from interacting with the other air and or the sound waves, then you can get better results using the same speaker. And so he's got a little bit of that going on because the speakers are in two physically different locations and spaces in the Droid. I think. I don't know. I'm not a sound engineer. And I just make things that seem like they're working. I don't know.
You're a miracle worker.
What's that?
You're like you're a miracle worker.
Use the
It just
matrix.
works. You don't know how you do it.
Yeah, it just happens. Lighting. Again, you don't have to ever put lighting in your droids, but they look cool with lighting. Most people are going to use LEDs, and there's a number of ways of doing that. In this situation, I've just got a red LED, a green LED, yellow, blue. Like they're one color LEDs. They never change colors. The only thing you do is change the brightness and when they come on. The other ways is doing a multicolor LED or neopixel LEDs, and those come in various shapes and sizes. But at the end of the day, this you can run with a straight signal and a resistor, and you're done. Whereas when you start doing these multi-pixel LEDs that have multiple colors, you need a controller or a driver that talks to that individual pixel, tells it which of the 3 LEDs, because there's still all 3 LEDs in that pixel, to get the different colors. For example, Chopper's bottom fire has a bunch of these LED pixels in them. And it's got a, I don't know if this is even on the camera or not, but you can see how it's got like a little fire pattern, but that's got an Arduino Nano controlling that fire pattern, telling each pixel to turn on and when, which requires them to be programmed. So the main lights, like you'd see in an R2-D2, like the PSIs and the logic and the PSI logic, hollow projectors, those are generally sold as, or can be sold as kits, or you can build your own. And in the picture here, this is all the components, 225 individual LEDs, the printed circuit boards that is commonly known as the TC's lighting system. And you buy, and there's the Curious Mark hollow projector or LED lights that go behind them. But you can literally put anything you want that fits in that space as long as you put some programming behind it. A lot of people are doing NeoPixel lights with fiber optic tube, a cluster or a matrix of fiber optic tubes to get more like the original A New Hope look on the lights for R2-D2. And they've also got light units that are with an Arduino Nano or some other small controller on the back that handle all that processing and lighting on board. So you just literally power it and you get the lighting effect. But the thing about the TCs is you can control the TCs with an outside source and then tell it to scroll text if you want, or have a special blinking pattern when he freaks out. So there's capabilities to talk to those other lighting systems and create the droid effects you're looking for. But if you don't know anything about lights, you can buy the kits, plug them in, power them, and you'll have lights on your droids. Or you can go down the hole of, or the rabbit hole of assembling other people's stuff and sourcing the parts yourself, which is what I did for R2-D2. Or you can design your own lighting system, which like guys like Trevor do. Yes?
Do you have a recommendation where we could find these light kits?
Astromech.net has a sales shop. There's a Ben Reese, I don't know his website. I can look it up, but he's got is it printeddroids.com? Can someone look that up and see if that comes up to a lighting site? He's got a lot of Astromech control boards and lighting kits and whatnot. He's over in Europe. He's actually done some DO parts and like the coin slots. He's got LED coin slots and just.
Is this in? Sorry, not the. Where's the website?
Yeah, that's it.
What is it?
All right.
So
So next, control systems. So we kind of touched on this before, but a control system is going to be a brain that is in your robot or your droid that talks to the servos and listens to your remote control commands. So there's a number of ways of doing that. You can have just about anything as your control device of choice. In this case, I'm using a PlayStation controller. This is using Bluetooth to send a signal to a Bluetooth receiver in Chopper, and then that Bluetooth receiver is being polled, or an Arduino is listening for those commands to come across, and then when it hears a command, it does something. So, like for example, I press the circle button, and Chopper's light comes on, and he makes a sound. If I press the front trigger and the left arrow, he does that, and he waggles his head, and etc., etc. The point is, the controlling device is a matter of preference, but it's going to lead you into a whole location of what does it control and who can listen to that. Last month I had the radio control using a Kyber system, which is the same model. You have a transmitter that transmits your intentions, a thing that hears the intentions and then sends that signal onto a downline device like a servo or a sound. And it's just that whole infrastructure. When you decide what control system you want to use, you look at cost. You look at, in this case, I can stand here and nobody knows I'm controlling Chopper because you don't see the controller. I can easily hide it. So that is super appealing to me, and that's why all my droids so far, except for our Duo, use these little PlayStation controllers. However, they're not really professional, and you're not going to get away in like a movie set using a Bluetooth controller. They want to see RC. So it depends on where you want to go with your droid and what you want to do with your droid as to what control system you ultimately choose. And each one will have a support forum and a bunch of people who know how to do it, particularly on Astromech and other websites out there. And you don't have to even do any of those. You can make your own. And there's people out there who take a radio control, a receiver, and start breaking down the code and creating their own control devices. So it's just really whatever method you choose to go down. But you're going to need some components that talk to each other and work together and then can execute and perform some actions for you. I guess the biggest difference between radio control and Bluetooth is the Bluetooth, you're going to have to do some actual programming at a computer. You can take somebody else's code and modify it to meet your droid's needs, but you're going to have to do some programming or find someone who knows how to do it. Whereas radio control, you don't have to do code, but you have to program the remote. And you can see a little screen here where you go to the menu, beep, 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 click, click, click. And it's a different type of programming because it's all menu driven, and you can't really have a bug that's going to cause your droid not to work. It just may not work the way you like it, so you have to keep modifying and adjusting it. But here, this is what controls the brains, and it's just talking to the servos at downline that receive the commands. Although the Kyber does do a little lifting for you, most RC, and you can talk to an Arduino with RC as well. In fact, a lot of people do. But the biggest difference is a lot of programming can be done straight up with the remote. And I think I have a picture. This may or may not play. There we go. You can also use your phone, and we kind of talked about that last time. This is the only reason I use a phone, is to do testing and tuning of the Droid as you're building it. So I'm trying to get all the servos to move the same amount, and all the servo horns to be located in the same place. So when I mount them in the Droid, the panels behave themselves.
What are those motors for?
All right, so this is my R2-D2 on the counter, and these are all his dome panels and lighting being controlled by a Arduino system. In this case, it's the R2 Touch app that allows you to test each and every panel
from your phone.
From my phone. And so to have that happen, you can see all the components that you saw in the back of the Droid. We're just here. I'm just trying to learn how to use them, which I recommend doing that. It's kind of called breadboarding, where you just hook it up in a kind of on your bench top and get it to work. Figure out how this wire goes to that wire, where the wire comes from, rather than try to put it in your Droid and learn those things.
How do you power it when you're working it like this?
All right, there's a few ways of doing it. One is to take the power that you're going to use in your Droid, batteries, and plug the batteries in appropriately with fuses and switches and those types of things. The other way is to get a bench top power supply, and you can get them off of Amazon. Get one that can do 5 amps and 30 volts, and you simply just power, and that's what I'm doing here, is I'm powering this whole thing by just going to the input bus, input place of where the 12 volts would go in the Droid, and then it powers this is, in this case, his dome. Any other questions? So, what powers Droids? Batteries. Well, what batteries do I get? I hear that question all the time. So here I've got the evolution of the batteries that I use for my Astromex. I went to the local battery store and got these, what they call SLA, sealed lead acid, I think is what SLA stands for. And they're heavy, but they're cheap. So this is, a 15-pound, or now the other dog must go out. Anyway, I don't know if they're 15 pounds or 10 pounds a piece, but this is a heavy chunk of batteries. All right. You're free. Anyway, and the weight wasn't as big an issue with an R2 unit because you put the batteries in the bottom and you want a low center of gravity. So that actually plays to an advantage, is the weight. The downside of these, although they're cheap, it takes forever for them to charge. Like, charge overnight, you'll get one, maybe. And I got 3 of them. Because what I did was 2 of them hooked together for my 24 volt, and the other is my 12 volt system. Whereas LiPo batteries, not only are they smaller, they're lighter, and they'll charge up like in 45 minutes. You can have both of these from storage to show ready, depending on your charger. But the LiPo batteries, there's a cost. There's 2 costs. One is they're more expensive, and you need a special charger, as I've shown here. But the other cost is you have to take care of these batteries. You can't just like sit them in the back of your closet and ignore them. Every few months or more, depending on how you're using them, you have to tend to the batteries, make sure they haven't discharged too much. You can't leave them charged. There's a whole routine with LiPos. There's other batteries that are less needy. Like a lot of people will use tool batteries. They'll go and get like a Ryobi battery, like an 18 volt, and use that, and just buy multiple of those and plug them into their Droids with adapters. A lot of folks are doing that, but the capacities and the use case, if you're only doing an event for a couple hours or a few hours, that may work for you. I haven't experimented with them. Maybe they last all day. I don't know. But it just seems that with the Droid use that I've done, if I have 4 of these batteries, 2 6S and 2 3S with LiPos, I can run my Droid all day long with no problems, as long as I don't leave the LED light on burning like that. That kills the battery.
You wouldn't think like an LED would kill the battery.
Well, when you have 96 of them running at however many milliamps they are, each it adds up to a big drain. So even with this, you have to manage your power, which is one of the things. It's the last bullet here, battery level monitoring, particularly with LiPos. You want a way to make sure your batteries don't run dead while you're using them. Number of ways of doing it. A lot of the radio control folks will use a timer. That's not really applicable because we don't have a constant drain on our droids. Another way is a low voltage cutout. It's just a little relay unit that listens to the voltage, and when it gets below a set value, it just goes into either a soft shutdown or a hard shutdown. I think the soft one lets you know, hey, I'm in trouble. I think there's maybe an alarm, and the next one it just cuts the power off so you cannot destroy your batteries. Another way of doing it is to tap into the balance cable of the battery and telemetry module and send that back to your receiver, like in the radio control world. And then the radio control will tell me when the batteries are low. It'll physically speak, battery warning, as I approach a dangerous, not necessarily it's going to blow up dangerous, but dangerous to the battery's overall health. So the other way you can do it is put one of those meters on it with a beeper on it. When it gets to 3 volts per cell, it starts beeping like a fire alarm. But when you're in a busy con, you may not hear that beeping and say, what's that? Oh no, it's too late. So, and if you leave that on your battery all the time, it'll drain the battery and destroy it as well. So at the end of the day, particularly with LiPos, you need a way of making sure the batteries can be managed and can stay healthy. It's not hard to do, it just needs to be done.
What batteries does Chopper use?
He uses these exact batteries here, these 5,000 milliamp 3S LiPos, and he's got 5,000 milliamp 6S LiPos. So a LiPo is a lithium polymer battery. The S rating is a number of cells. So each cell is 4.2 volts max, 3.7, 3.8 kind of mid. If you get below 3 volts per cell, you've killed the battery forever and ever, amen.
Oh.
So,
they're 100 plus.
Yeah, in this parlance, it says 11.1 volts. That's the storage. It's actually, in my mind, a 12 volt battery. It powers the 12 volt system. A 6S is double that. It's a 24 volt battery, but this is kind of like the storage rating that you see on the battery. And when you're talking batteries, you want the battery to match the job. Yeah. So in my mind, the 12 volt battery manages my 12 volt system, and I step from 12 down to 5 or 6 for the servos. Whereas the 24 volt batteries go straight to the 24 volt motors, and they don't talk to those two systems don't talk to each other than the signal wire from the Arduino or whatever going to the motor controller.
And what was the tool battery that you mentioned?
The 12 volt?
The tool batteries.
Oh, the tool battery, like a Ryobi, like they have 18 volt. I think I've seen 18, 30.
How do they connect them? They have such a weird connection point.
So you go to Thingiverse, and they have adapters, and you basically build your own connections, or maybe you take a tool and cannibalize it and make that connector. But I haven't gone down that path, but I think there's files on Thingiverse that have particularly the mounting brackets that you just somehow put contacts in and create a usable battery.
And how come would lithium ion batteries work at all?
Sure. Any rechargeable battery will do the trick. It's just a matter of picking one, buying it, and learning how to use it, and putting it in. The LiPo batteries are particularly suited for this high draw task. And I'm not a battery expert. I just kind of did enough research to land on these, and I couldn't tell you why right now off the top of my head. Why I know I can tell you I didn't choose tool batteries because the exact thing you asked. Well, how do I connect to it? With this, that's how you connect to it. There's a plug, and it's an EC5, and it plugs, and I'm done.
What's the draw for those LiPo batteries?
The draw?
Yeah,
Like, you mean the current?
I think so.
So there's a C rating on the battery,
Yeah.
which is basically how much current that battery can deliver. The higher the C rating, the higher the current. So like a 100C battery can deliver more amps than a 50C battery, than a 10C battery. So I'm not a super expert on the C rating of the battery, but I'm told that's overkill for what I'm doing. But
Okay.
I started with 100C, so I'm scared to go to 50, but so far it's worked.
I'm trying to compare with the lightsaber I have. It's a 15A. I think it's 15 amps is the draw for it.
15 amps sounds really, really high. Like one of my motors that drives the Droid, like a Razor scooter motor, might, when it turns on at peak load, draw 30 amps. And when it's driving around, it's probably 3.5 amps. So a 15 amp and a lightsaber just sounds really
I
high.
think it's because it uses over 250 neopixel LEDs.
Oh, well, maybe it does.
Yeah.
Maybe it does. And like I said, without looking at it, I wouldn't know.
Now, Tim, you have yours wired, you said parallel in your droids. So you have 2 6-cell batteries together.
Correct.
And 2 3-cells. Do you just buy a wire like that and that parallels it, or do you have to do something?
You can do it either way. You can build your own paralleling cable. It's easy to do. You just basically join it in a parallel circuit, Google that, and then solder it up. Or you can buy a pre-made paralleling cable or series cable if you want to double the amps or double the volts. Which I have in R2D2. He's got 6 identical batteries that I series in parallel to get a double capacity 24 volt system. And then for the 12 volt system, I just double the capacity by paralleling.
How long do your batteries usually last on average for like chopper?
So chopper generally goes 13 hours or so.
Oh, that's amazing.
And
For release, right? Or do
yeah, so he generally goes longer than I want to be out with him, but I think when we last had that Dragon Con, I didn't get home till 4 in the morning and Chopper was still going, and we started around noon, I think.
And there's only 2 batteries in him?
He's got 4. He's got 2 of these 5S, or 3S 5,000 milliamp, and 2 of the 6S.
So it's only, when you parallel them, it's only drawing a little bit of power from each battery, but still providing the same, that one battery.
Yeah, well, when you do that, you've actually given it more of a pool of energy to draw from. So I don't know that it takes less from each one, but each one has more overhead to pulse and provide a bigger chunk of power at once. And again, I'm not an electrical anything. This is my brain. That's how I cartoonize these complex things in my head. So it's like this is the Lego version of it.
I like Lego versions.
All right.
Like when I mentioned earlier, you're a miracle worker. It just works.
It just works. All right. So the last thing I want to leave you with is this is a guy who's in the Drinks and Droids group. He created a website that has guides on control systems and on electrics and all these topics that I've covered kind of off the surface. He's got an in-depth, I think I can click on it here. Beep. I'm not connected to the internet. So I can click on it, but you guys can, let me put the link back up there so you can see it. And there we go. For some reason I'm not connected to the internet. So go here. It's a great resource. It's condensed. It's he's on version 2 of it, so he's updated it at least once. And that's a great place to kind of do some of your own research and catch up with things. Any other questions? Chopper, you got anything? Mind your mouth. All right, with that, can you shut us down? Bye.